folks. Zach Withers coming at you with another episode of the Abattoir Blues. And for those just joining us, this is where I take selfie videos while driving obscene distances to haul animals to USDA inspected processing facilities, and so we can get meat into our butcher shop. So right now I'm headed to Durango, Colorado, my favorite place, Sunnyside Meats. Shout out to Sunnyside, one of the best, nicest plants in the Southwest. Really, really great people. Unfortunately, 225 miles away from my farm. So the reason for this is because the federal government hates food freedom. Shut down all of the small mid-scale food processors to create corporate monopolies for a handful of really enormous global corporations that now control so much of our food supply that even though the federal government really wants to change the way things are and create a more resilient and reliable food system, especially after we saw what the consequences of that level of consolidation and concentration and control were when COVID hit, and they used the pandemic to create scarcity, to drive up prices, to create absolutely obscene amounts of record profits for themselves, while scaring the shit out of everybody. And it's a bad deal. Unfortunately, the political will to take on corporate monopolies isn't quite there yet. That whole corporate lobbyist thing really jamming things up. Anyway, so hauling 8 hogs up, and I got to go back on Tuesday and pick up the carcasses. Full blown into a political campaign. We got 5 weeks left or something. Running for state representative, the House. Apparently, I need to say House because some people don't know that the representatives are in the House and that the senators are in the Senate. I'm also really stoked. I got invited to go talk to the high school seniors at East Mountain High School, where I graduated from high school in 2007, and talk about governance and government and politics. I wonder if they'll invite me back in future years after they hear what I have to say. I hope so, but I kind of doubt it. Another thing, so I've been thinking a lot about what I would do if I actually, by some miracle, ended up getting elected to public office. Because to be perfectly honest with you, I didn't think that was even in the realm of the possible when I, put my name out there and collected I figured winning would be just getting enough signatures to get my name on the ballot and be like, oh, cool, maybe we'll change the narrative, shift the narrative a little bit, which is actually working, but that part's really encouraging. I'll talk more about that in a minute. But the level of resistance I'm getting from the incumbent opponent, and the amount of the outpouring of support that I see in my community makes me think that it's not totally far out there that I could actually get elected, which is weird. So let's play a little brain game here. If I got elected to the House of Representatives in the state of New Mexico, I don't think they call it the House of Representatives, just the state legislature, what would I do? The short answer is I would try to get myself run out of town on a rail as quickly as possible. That's the what. The how is what's more interesting here, right? So I got a short list of legislation that I would want to run. One of the biggest things that I think is totally screwed up about our state is that it is just so damn corrupt, and it is dysfunctional. So let me zero in on a couple issues here. One, the process for creating the budget and for allocating money is completely divorced from the process for creating legislation. So there is no connection between passing a law that says we're going to start a program, or we're going to do this, or we're going to do that, and actually getting it funded. And the funding part happens with the governor and a very small handful of people, and happens behind closed doors. And so all of the power in the state is really concentrated in the executive, and is not just the executive, but kind of the entrenched ruling coincidence that the governor and our senator have the same last name. Just put it that way. So it'd be interesting to run a bill that says that you can't fund anything unless the legislature authorizes the funding. I don't think the governor would appreciate that, but I think the legislature might. I think everybody on both sides is a little bit pissed off at the governor and her sort of mini tyrant ways. So that'd be a fun one. Another, but there's sort of a double-edged sword there, because the legislature isn't exactly a shining emblem of competency and ethics and integrity. Like, we don't even have an ethics committee, or maybe they finally get one a couple years ago, but it's got no teeth. It's not a very straight up body of people, so maybe it would be a bad idea, but I'd run the bill anyways. The other things that I've been thinking about more, I'll do a serious and then fun one. One of the fun ones that I'd like to run, I want to ban billboards. Like, we should just get rid of billboards all over New Mexico. Take them all down. And, the companies can sue us, whatever, pay them takings, losses for the cost of the metal, and screw them. I lived in Vermont for a few years when I was in school, and I got so spoiled because there's no billboards anywhere, and it's you just see the beauty of the place. And I'm sure there's a bunch of people you're gonna kill our economy. I'm I'm sorry, but the 27 billboards on I-40 advertising for one gas station, it's not gonna kill the economy. You put one or two billboards for a business, within a couple miles of that business, educational, make sure people know when they can get gas or food or whatever. But the billboard every 100 yards is just it drives me crazy. Anyway, I make some philosophical argument about how public spaces should not be able to be capitalized on for private gains, something to that effect. Now back to the serious bits. So the other thing that I think we need to do, in addition to requiring legislative approval for any expenditures, is that then open up the degree to which the state can allocate money. So we need to amend the anti-donation clause. So instead of having a rule that just says that the state can only give money to state entities or to political subdivisions of the state, which is the current case, have a rule that says the state can give money to anybody, but it has to be authorized by the entire state legislature. That'd be a more effective way to open up the ability of the state to take on really tough problems like the water situation, land health stuff. Which connects back to the water situation, local economy, fire danger. A lot of things that are really important in our district are hard to deal with because there just isn't capacity at a local level. At the county, at the land grant communities, the soil and water conservation districts, it's volunteer boards that are, even if they're showing up as best as they can, they are not adequately staffed and equipped to be able to administer the sort of funds that we need to get out on the ground to be able to have a meaningful impact in addressing the multiple crises facing our community. The reason we have the anti-donation clause is to try to prevent corruption and prevent people from giving stuff to their cousins and stuff. We could have a different way of doing that by making the legislature do the work to actually fund things and improve things. What are some of the other fun ones I've been thinking about? I really want to do an anti-barratry, I think the term is. So there used to be this concept that if you hired a ship captain to take your boat and deliver goods somewhere, and the ship captain sank your boat, that you could hold him liable for being a dumbass and sinking your boat. That evolved into law in England that You could hold an attorney liable for abusing the legal system. And this is one that I would love to run. I'd like to modify there's some legislation that already exists that says that it's just a misdemeanor, but it's a crime to engage in litigation with malicious intent. So you can't sue somebody just to be an asshole. And I hear all the time, well, it's America and you can sue anybody for anything, and that's retarded. Like, I'm not supposed to use that word anymore, sorry, but it's stupid. Like, I'm dealing with a lawsuit right now that is, from my perspective, entirely aimed at impeding my ability to run a political campaign. And like, I told my lawyers when we first met that this was just dirty politics, and they didn't believe me. And they strongly cautioned me against saying anything of that sort. And then 2-3 weeks later, they called me back and they're like, we don't understand what the substance of this lawsuit is. We've looked at all the documents you sent us. What's going on here? And I said, well, this is just dirty politics. The person who's suing us is good friends with the incumbent, and filed the lawsuit with the courts 3 weeks after they found out that I was collecting signatures. They signed up to receive email notices about my campaign. 3 weeks later, there's a lawsuit in the courts, and then a week after I got on the ballot, I actually got served with the lawsuit. And so now we're into the height of campaign season, and they're starting to, we have to be at the same time filing a response to this 27-page document. And the lawyer on the other side knows, like, that there's no substance to this, that he's just doing this to F with us. And I'd love to make it a little bit easier for people to, if you can prove that there's no basis in fact or substantive basis in law for bringing a case against somebody, that they should be able to countersue, or that the judge should be able to, at their own discretion, sanction attorneys and to, in extreme cases, disbar them from practicing in New Mexico for abusing the legal system and using it as a weapon for political, personal, or business ends. That'll be a tough one to get passed, because half the people in Santa Fe are lawyers and they all make money doing shit like that. So I don't know if that one's going to go over too well either. Some of the other fun ideas I've had the last few days. This is one that actually I probably could get a lot of people on board with. I'd like to pass a piece of legislation pertaining to federal lands and other state lands, or not, other jurisdictions. No, probably just federal, honestly, because I don't really want to get into it with the tribes or local governments or anything. But the federal lands, which is about half of the state or a third of the state, somewhere in between, they don't pay taxes on that land. They have something called payment in lieu of taxes, and I think it's it's kind of a token payment, and I don't like tokens. I mean, they're fun when you were kids, and you got the tokens and you had to trade them in for a slinky or whatever, but I don't want slinkies from the federal government. I want them to pay their fair share. So I think it'd be interesting to run legislation that says that any entity that fails to pay an amount equivalent to whatever the regular taxes would be will forfeit their ownership of the land and will claim jurisdiction, and let's try to take all the federal lands back from the feds in New Mexico. Or try to get them to come to the table and negotiate and ship more in. Or maybe he could really get get an honest negotiation going, use it to sort of leverage things to say that the federal government has a responsibility to effectively manage the land that they claim jurisdiction over. Like, it is shameful that they've had a 100-year no-burn policy. Now they're trying to, reverse course and restore some equilibrium to our forests, but they underfund things, and then they burn down communities, and then they don't pay people for the houses after they burn them down. What the hell, over? So, you can get 10 years in prison and a $100,000 fine for doing damages to federal property in excess of $100 worth of damage. 10 years, $100 worth of damage. If you mess up a sign at a federal, national forest or something, and they catch you, they can put you in jail for 10 years. The federal government burned down 500 people's houses and said, nah, not a problem. Oh, and we're also going to cut funding to the agencies that are supposed to be administering these lands. and then we're gonna, when we don't cut the funding, we're gonna tell the Forest Service that they have to pay for the firefighting efforts out of their own pocket on their normal budget that they use for paying their normal staff. There's a full-blown war on public lands. The IRA funding at the federal level that was supposed to go towards conservation and fund things like thinning forests, they're trying to cut out, and there's a small pocket of House Republicans that are trying to put all of that funding into subsidizing their rich friends, and it's really annoying. But that's a little bit of a tangent. Just fun legislation we could run. We should start sending bills to the BLM for the negative impacts of overgrazing on federally leased lands on users downstream. Something. We got to get some more money coming in from the feds. Got to diversify our revenue streams. And oil and gas is too many eggs in one basket. Oh, that's another one I've talked about before. Something that I'd really like to do is add some language in to define what constitutes a beneficial use for the purposes of administering water. So the Office of the State Engineer is currently tasked with putting New Mexico's waters to beneficial use, which doesn't have a definition. And it kind of gets interpreted as use all the water as fast as you can to make as much money as possible. I shouldn't be so glib. There are good people at the OSC that fight really hard to try to do a good job of governing and stewarding our water resources. But you talk to them, they need updated mandates that include conservation, that include, language about supporting functioning water cycles, not just use all the water as fast as you can, and some clear direction on what actually we're trying to use the water for. So I'd like to include language that, one thing I think we need to do is tie water back to the land, at least at a watershed scale. So how do you manage something if anybody can just come in and just buy it up and ship it off somewhere else? Really, really hard to think about how we can deal with the reality of losing, 25 to 40% of our water availability over the next few decades, if water can just run uphill towards money. So defining, beneficial use as being use that occurs in the same hydrological basin, that would be a big one. And the other fun one is to define a beneficial use as one that does not permanently render water unusable. So apparently there's this new technology that the oil and gas industry has come up with that is able to completely restore fracking water and purify it back to like usable quality. Maybe you don't want to drink it, but like it's at least detoxified enough that they claim it can be used for agriculture. But the oil and gas industry wants a $500 million subsidy. We want them to pay them to clean up their own mess. And I think it'd be interesting to make their use of water for doing things like fracking contingent upon them investing in that technology and developing the capacity to restore that water to the same level of health and cleanliness as it was when they got it, before they put it back into circulation. Yeah, I don't think that one's going to make me any friends, but it'd be fun. Some other like things that I think actually would not be nearly as revolutionary or contentious, but I think we could update the state tax law. Right now, it currently says that you need to have a minimum of 160 acres to qualify for a grazing, agricultural use for grazing, which is kind of silly because the way it works is the state writes the tax laws and then the counties implement them however they feel like doing it. And so there's a lot of folks that, you know, have their 2 acres and they have their 3 goats and then they're considered agriculturalists and get a 90% break on their taxes. You know, which, I mean, I don't want to like screw over all the homesteaders and the sustenance farmers, but on some level, like, we're incentivizing really poor management of land by doing that. And I think we could make some tweaks to that tax code that could incentivize like a different model that could be way more ecologically beneficial and also economically beneficial, and actually create capacity in the local food system instead of just having the like sort of 5th wave of colonization of like the homesteaders moving in to get their 5 acres and their milking cow or whatever, and set it up where you can get a small landowners, like small parcel landowners, be able to get a grazing credit for leasing the land to a professional grazing company, so like the goatscaping sort of thing. So if you sign a contract with a company that says that they're going to bring goats on once or twice a year, in like a proper herd of goats, where you have a sufficient sort of density of animals to have like real animal impact, where you actually get that like natural grazing effect that stimulates like soil health and gets the plants to like shoot those exudates back into the soil that feed all the little organisms that, you know, feed the plants that sequester carbon and yada yada yada, and then make sure that there's a sufficient rest period for all of the plants to fully grow back, and then you graze them again, and you give grazers a guaranteed they're going to get these many grazing days per year, and these are the services that they're going to provide, and then they're able to charge people what it actually costs to keep those sort of operations running, because it's not cheap, it's an expensive business. But if people were able to claim a tax break based on being able to show that they have a contract where they're going to pay a local grazer to come in and do like intensive grazing treatments, then they could qualify for getting that tax break. So in addition to the ecological services, getting your lawn mowed and fertilized, you also get like some serious tax write-offs. You know, I'm envisioning like these mountains is so full of these little 2 to 5 acre lots. They can support an animal for a couple weeks. Like if you have 5 acres, you're probably going to get enough. On a good year, you can really responsibly graze for 2 to 4 weeks with like a couple animal units, an animal unit being like 1,000 pounds. So if you have 2 horses, you get about 2 weeks of grazing. After that, you're overgrazing, and at that point, like, you're actually damaging the soil, and you're damaging your neighbors by, like, when you denude soil and you get rid of, you know, overgraze it and cause the the amount of plants to go down and the soil becomes unhealthy and starts to erode, it actually interrupts water cycles. So everybody's wells are fed, we all sit on top of the same water resources. We all share water resources, and the income, the amount of water going back into the ground, is based on the health of the soils. And like well-vegetated, healthy soils are going to sequester more water. If you overgraze, continual set stock grazing, is not good for the soil. It's not good for the plant communities. So shifting, making little tweaks like that could be pretty powerful. So that's some of the stuff that I would actually try to do if I got elected. There's some other things that are happening that other folks are pushing really hard on, like independent redistricting. Man, I just found out there's like a couple, I don't know exactly how many, it looks like 3 streets for like the course of several blocks in the Northeast Heights that are part of District 22. Which is the East Mountains, Bernalillo County, east of Carnuel, and most of Torrance County, and then like a couple of random people in Albuquerque. It's like, how the hell did that happen? Like, why did that community get, connected to a district that is separated by like a mountain, literally? There's no connection. It's stupid. It also annoys the hell out of me that like I have neighbors who live 2-3 miles away from me who can't vote for me because I'm like pretty close to the edge of Bernalillo County, and people in a community right down the street are connected to a district that is also on the other side of a mountain. I mean, the city of Edgewood, I think, is split between the Senate and the House sides into 4 different districts. It's like, why? Like, how are we supposed to elect somebody to represent our community when we're actually electing like 4 different people to elect our community? Like, it breaks communities up in this way that makes no sense. And I understand, like, it's kind of tough when you have these huge population density issues. This is why at the federal level we have the Senate and the House, is like everybody gets representation equally in one side, and then it's kind of based on population on the other side. And so you gotta split up the population centers a little bit, but like I don't get it. Like there's got to be a smarter way to do this. What it feels like, my experience to date in this race, it feels a lot like it is intentionally designed to create control over certain areas and allocate that control to certain parties, and that it's also intended to keep communities divided so that they are unified by federal issues, and that people aren't coming together around local issues, because you're having to appeal to a bunch of people that are in different, like, it's weird to me that the where I live in like San Antonio, Sandia Park area is in the same district as Mountain Air. It's an hour south of us, and like the Estancia Valley has, like, I feel like the Estancia Valley is like heavily disenfranchised in a way that like gets sort of covered up by the fact that they gerrymandered the district to make it very heavily Republican, which in a sense sort of like ensures that, the Estancia Valley and agricultural areas generally are very red. So there's like this solidly red district that then sort of like, but there's this population. I just like, it's a weird, the lines are weird. I don't like them. I think that whoever is drawing those lines should not be affiliated party, or we need some different. The guidelines are like, it's like one sentence that says they have to be relatively compact and contiguous. Like that's not a lot of information to go for to base decisions about how we conduct democratic process. It's room for improvement there. I'm not an expert on that, but that's something where I'm sure other people are bringing the heat, and I'd love to be in there helping them get it done. There's another thing. This is getting really winded, but I have 3.5 hours, so I might put a 3.5 hour video up here. Why not? It's so beautiful. Such a beautiful drive. So another thing that I've been thinking about a lot is people keep on asking me, like, are you like a Republican or a Democrat? And I was like, no, I'm not. And they're like, do you lean more conservative or liberal? And I'm like, I don't. Like, I'm not. It's difficult for me to try to explain this in a really short and concise way. But the reality is, I think that the Democrats and the Republicans are totally in agreement on the vast majority of things. And people, like, have a sort of visceral reaction to that, where it's like cognitive dissonance, because they're like, no, they're on the opposite ends of the spectrum. And it's like, not really. Like, they make a lot of noise about a couple of issues that they use to manipulate and divide people, but the vast majority of things, like, they're not that different. Food, like, up until this farm bill, there's never been serious partisan divide around what and how we should produce and distribute food. It has been broad consensus all across both parties for the last 75 years. We want an industrialized, super efficient, globalized commodity food system that focuses on eliminating the maximum number of farmers possible, consolidating control down to a small handful of companies who can deliver an unlimited supply of super cheap food. That is a bipartisan consensus, and that is like a major policy position that is actually really radical. Like that, not radical, it's extreme. It's like, it's kind of crazy. This is not a sensible approach to how to produce food and to, like, manage the land and take care of the land, the water, the basis for our civilization, for a free society. Just being like, as long as it's cheap and there's lots of it, and we're gonna pick 5 commodities, and we'll subsidize the biggest 10% of the growers with 90% of the subsidies, and it'll be the second biggest expenditure in all of the federal funding. Like, that's at the federal level. At the state level too, though, like, we've had the same the same Secretary of Agriculture for like 4 different administrations now. Like Jeff Whitty, who's hilarious. He's a great guy. He's serving under Lujan Grisham. He was previously under was it Garcia or whatever her name was. And I think he was definitely under Babyface or Bill Richardson, and I'm pretty sure he served under Mr. No, under the Libertarian guy who came before that. Whatever his name was. Now, you could get into it and be like, well, this is because the Secretary of Agriculture is appointed by the Board of Regents of the universities, land-grant universities, and it's not a politicized position, so the governors don't have any say, and the universities just prefer, whatever. The universities are heavily influenced by their, big ag corporate commodity suppliers. Guys like Bayer and Monsanto control the seeds, and all the chemical companies and all the people who make money in agriculture make money selling chemicals, and so they influence the process both at the state and the federal level to make sure that we're doubling down on that really extractive, very input heavy, chemical, petrochemical, fuel intensive sort of farming. So farming's an easy one. Monetary and fiscal policy, like corporate capitalism rules the day. Like we're not even in it. It's like we're post-capitalism. I don't even know what to call this anymore. Like our entire economy is set up to extract as much value from as many people as possible and concentrate it into the hands of an extremely small group of people. Like we have we have the most crazy economic system that you could possibly imagine. Like we're just making this shit up. Well, $5 trillion for you and $10 trillion for you, and we'll just print more money until there's more money, and we don't need to actually be concerned with reality or like producing anything or like having a stable economy. We just need infinite forever growth. Like it is really crazy, and both the Republicans and the Democrats are 100% on board. Like the Republicans are like, we need to eliminate all things except for private corporate property rights. And the Democrats are like, well, we have to make some token signals that we're gonna try to but yeah, basically. So the food we eat, the water we drink, the money we spend, foreign policy, like it's getting kind of weird now, but generally the last 50 years there's been very little in the way of dispute about we want things to be global kings of the world, whatever. Even immigration, which is a funny one because there's so much more substantive disagreement, but right underneath those disagreements about whether or not we should provide pathways to citizenship for people who have been here for a long time, yada yada, there's still this really intense consensus around two facts related to immigration. One, 100% support open borders, both parties, hardcore. You can't have NAFTA and then also say you want to have a closed border. It doesn't work, 35,000 trucks a day coming across the borders. We open border policy for goods, but we're gonna transport everything using drones because we don't want the people to drive the trucks. Or it's also totally disconnected from reality. People talk about we need to build a wall. Have you ever been to the U.S.-Mexico border? Have you spent any time in border country? There are 100-mile stretches where it's there's no plausible way that you could physically construct any sort of barrier that would prevent people from being able to come across the border. I mean, go to Big Bend. It's a beautiful place. You could just walk right into Mexico, no problem, anywhere. And there's not a damn thing anybody's ever going to do to stop that. The other thing that people should be tuned into is that both Democrats and Republicans are deeply invested in maintaining a steady stream of illegal immigrants into this country because they do the work and we don't want to pay them. Devaluation of labor. I mean, this is the Monroe policy. We're going to control South America and Central America entirely. The global influence in, especially Central American affairs is not an option, and we're going to destabilize their governments. We're going to flood their markets with cheap commodity food that displace local indigenous farmers, drive people out of the countryside, undermine rural communities, create a huge amount of displaced people that then will, in the context of facing totalitarian oppression from governments that we often install to our bidding, then end up fleeing north in search of a better life, and those people are easily exploited. And that is the bipartisan consensus when it comes to immigration, and all of the Republican nonsense about, oh, we need to secure the border, is just pseudo-fascist, xenophobic, racist bullshit. And I really, like, you can tell me all about all the terrible things and people who are coming into this and the drugs and the blah, 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 blah. Like, this is a fabricated situation that was fabricated by a bipartisan consensus on how to create a cheap, easily exploitable labor force. And the unintended consequences of that are being used to stir partisan allegiance, you know, but nobody's actually talking about real solutions, because what they want, they've already got on both sides, and nothing is going to change. You know, I would, like, I'm not going to do anything about immigration because it's a federal issue. Like, the fourth, Article 4 of the Constitution says clearly that defense of the borders is a federal issue. Like, feds deal with it. It would be nice if we had more agricultural workers. Like, I had a good friend, a farm that we bought food from for a lot of years, that the farmer fell on really hard times, medical stuff in the family. You know, after a very long time of having, like, a really good working relationship, the migrant worker that was doing all the work at his farm, he ended up in a situation where he couldn't pay his workers because you don't have health insurance when you're a farmer. You don't have savings a lot of the time. And so when he had to deal with a, like, huge onset of medical bills that bankrupted him and put him under, the migrant worker that was there with his family and had been there for 20 some odd years, like, wasn't getting paid and was being exploited, and then ended up in this terrible situation where he was taking things from the farmer so that he could feed his family, and then the farmer, like, and then, like, I don't know where he went, you know. And I don't, like, who am I gonna blame here? You know, my friend that I've done business with for 4 years, who showed up with the most beautiful vegetables, the most beautiful produce that you can imagine. It's just like, you know, you dig his hands into the greenhouse and you come out with 10 worms in it. You know, he's like such a good dad, like, good husband, just a super solid guy, who is now, like, been reported to ICE and is, like, probably gonna, you know, is on the run, and is, like, his family's been torn apart. Or am I gonna blame the farmer, like the white guy who, like, had all of his shit stolen because he's been in an industry for 45 years where you don't get paid more than the cost of production, and, like, the violence against, you know, farmers in this country, you know. So, like, if you want to talk about immigration and you're gonna throw some xenophobic shit about, oh, well, all of our problems are coming across the border, like, pull your head out of your ass. Like, these are good people. There's just as many rapists and drug dealers that are already in this country who are not brown as are coming across the border. Like, that's not the problem. Just smoke and mirrors, just distraction. Try to play on the worst parts of society, the most racist, ignorant parts of the population, to stir, you know, to perpetuate this system that's screwing everybody over. Like, people don't even get, do you know what happens if, like, we don't have migrant labor showing up on farms? We don't have food. The vast majority of our food is produced by brown people because we devalue their labor by not giving them a way to come in and work as, you know, people, respected, you know, welcome parts of the community. We say, no, you're illegal. You're a criminal just by being here. And that way we're able to exploit them to drive down the price of what we consume. So like anytime that you go to a grocery store and buy food for, you get a 99-cent pound of chicken wings, whatever, like the guy that grew the crops, the guy that took care of the animals, the people who cut those animals up at a high-speed kill plant, almost all of them are migrants. Like this whole country is migrants. Like, what are we talking about? Sorry, that one got a little bit intense. Gotta go back to some fun, light-hearted stuff. Paisano Pizzeria. Ooh, Tesla box truck. These things are so damn ugly. Oh, I had another one. I think that we should pass a law that says that you can't start a power utility and not tie the power utility into local power grids. Like, they're going to put the largest wind farm in North America. I don't think it's actually in District 22. It's more like Klein's Corners. It's probably in like 50 or something. But none of the power is going to be used in New Mexico. It's all going to California, which is just crazy. It's also stirred quite a bit of debate coming back around to the beneficial use question. They have to do dust mitigation while they're building. They've gone in and just ripped up all these roads, and they're doing like massive amounts of construction with no consideration. Like, there's no environmental impact studies, nothing. Just tearing shit up, and but it's environmentally friendly, right? And I think it's kind of nonsense. Like, if you're gonna put that much power generation in the Estancia Valley, and then not like make sure people in the Estancia Valley have like cheap power, like what? We get to deal with the flashing lights and the construction in the roads, and then we get to be probably left to deal with 20 years from now when all these things are no longer functional, and like, we're gonna deal with the mess and the cleanup and all the the erosion and the loss of agricultural use and blah 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 blah. But while they're doing this, they have to take truckloads of water out there and spray water on the ground to keep the dust down, which, like, in a place where you're 40 years out from being sort of out of water, like, why are we going to use hundreds of millions of gallons of water to keep dust down? Like, shouldn't there be some variance for that? What's the deal there? And also, it's kind of weird that, like, a water co-op is able to sell water for that purpose when they're also supposed to be providing water out of rapidly diminishing water supplies to the people who live in those communities. Like, do we have really, like, the appropriate oversight for how private companies can buy and sell and use and redistribute water? I don't think so. There's another one that came up that was really interesting, that's very relevant to people in our community. The issue of insurance for fire danger in, like, fire-prone areas. So a lot of people are losing their insurance because insurance companies are looking at these mountains and being like, that shit's gonna burn down. This is gonna be bad. So we don't want to be liable for that. I think there's something like $8 billion worth of residential infrastructure, like houses and roads and power lines and whatnot, that would likely burn down in the case of a major wildfire in the Sandias. Poses a really interesting conundrum. I don't know if it's interesting. It's kind of frightening, but also interesting. Because what do you do about it? Like, the insurance companies don't want to cover it because they're like, that's like it's a bad deal for us, right? If all that mountain burns down and we have to replace everybody's homes, $8 billion worth of infrastructure, like, not a good business move, right? And like, understandably so. I'm not, I can't really be mad at the insurance companies for wanting to play CYA a little bit there. But also, like, if they don't insure homes against fire danger, if it is a thing that, these insurance companies protect their profit margins by just refusing to cover houses in these mountains, and then we get a big fire and nobody's insured because nobody can get insurance for fire, I don't think the banks are gonna just be like, well, since you lost your house, you don't have to pay your mortgage anymore. It's fine. We'll just let that one go. That's not gonna happen, right? So what's the move here? Should we try to legislate that private companies have to take on like huge amounts of financial risk by providing insurance coverage for these fire-prone areas? Like, do we subsidize already immensely profitable corporations to try to offset that risk? Or do we do like the California thing where we say everybody has to buy this state insurance that's going to be obscenely expensive because we can't get people who actually know how to operate an insurance company to come work for a state bureaucracy because it is annoying and sucks. So we'll just charge everybody a ton of money and hope that we can somehow cover everything when the fires come. Like, I'm not a big fan of that idea either. But I'm definitely not a fan of like everybody just being left homeless and bankrupt because of a fire. So, and a fire in the East Mountains is not an if, it's a when. Like, that shit's coming. And I don't think we're prepared. Like, there's like a nice little pamphlet, ready, set, go. It's like, it would take me weeks to effectively evacuate all of my livestock, and like, where are you going to take them? It's not a whole lot of options. I mean, I'm sure we'd figure it out real quick if we had to, but then I think about like my neighbor Sandy is like housebound, like on a walker. Like, the things that I would need to get out first would all be like people, like my parents are right next to the forest. They're, it's like, all right, I got to get my parents out, I got to make sure Sandy's out, and then like we got a bunch of livestock. Things pop off quick, like bad deals. Very little capacity to actually do anything about it too. Like, where are you gonna get the water? With all the wells running dry. There used to be a pond up on Crest Road that they let stay full using pumping groundwater, but they've pumped the groundwater down so much the stream stops running, and the landowners have just stopped topping it off. So there's some lakes up by the ski area that could be a good thing, but if you get a real hot fire going on that mountain, you're not going to be able to get into that area. And it's tough. These are problems that I don't think most people want to think about and talk about, let alone make the focus of their political campaign, because anything that resembles a real solution to any of these things is going to piss a whole lot of people off. But not implementing any solutions has some really catastrophic potential implications, so I don't think that's really an option either. Gotta do something, and hopefully do something smart. It's well thought out, it's based in reality. It's not about political partisan nonsense or who's trying to get reelected for what, or protecting which corporate interests, or blah 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 blah. Like, we need some really, really sharp, tuned in, collaborative effort to try to make some meaningful changes and work towards real solutions. Because this is a beautiful place, and it's an amazing community. Like, I love New Mexico. I love being from here. I love the culture. I love everything about it, except the government. Yeah, back onto the rabble rouse. Like, what else are we gonna do in Santa Fe to piss people off? I mean, to raise in concern awareness, raise hell. I mean, yeah, raise some hell. Told myself that I wasn't going to talk crap about anybody and I wasn't going to make any promises. The making promises part, I want to make clear, all this stuff, I'm not saying I'm going to get any of this done. It would be, if I got even one of those things accomplished, I'd be doing really good. It's not a terribly functional town, this Santa Fe place. Reforming the E+ program is another one that I think needs to happen. There's a push. All the hunters want to get rid of the E+ program, put all the tags back into the public draw. Right now, about a little over half of the rights for hunting elk, specifically, go to private landowners, and that it's like $100 million a year industry. Like, there's a lot of money involved in this. And hence quite a bit of corruption. And it would be naive to say that you can effectively manage a wildlife population without managing half of their habitat. You know, it's about a 50-50 split between private and public land. So it kind of makes sense that half the hunting is going to happen on private land. So you need to have a way to interface with private landowners for the management of publicly owned game. But what we don't need to do is privatize game and move away from the North American system of game management, which is very, very clear. Wild animals belong to the public. It's like the water, it's like the air. These are things that you cannot own. They belong to everybody. They are managed and stewarded by the state. And the state has something called a game commission, which is tasked with that. And so there is an attempt to reform the game commission that passed no problem through the legislature and then got vetoed by the governor, because the governor likes using, you know, that as political fodder for whatever crap nonsense. But I do think we need to reform the game commission. I think we need to have a lot of public input. Like, I think we need to have an advisory council with 21 people on it, and we need a dozen of them to be working ranchers, like, and, you know, private, like, hobby owner, like, landowners, private landowners who aren't in agriculture, like absentee landowners sort of nonsense. Like, give them like one. Get a couple of the outfitters in there. You know, that's a really important industry for a lot of rural communities. It's you know, it's not to throw the baby out with the bathwater. And then, like, scientists. Like, we need ecologists. We need, you know, people who are managing, you know, herd health. People who are looking at the impact of the herd on the local ecology, on the water systems, on the riparian areas, on the plant communities. Like, elk can be hugely devastating to natural environments when they're mismanaged. Like, the Vividal is a good example, where they've managed this as like a trophy hunting reserve, and as a consequence, the elk populations are so high that it's interrupting the succession of keystone species like aspen. You can't find it. You can hardly find any aspen that are less than 20 years old in the Vividal, and like that's a problem. You know, the headwaters for the Vividal are like the high country of alluvial, what are they called? These big bogs. They absorb insane amounts of water, and they purify the water, and then they let it out to the creeks, and that, like, is very, very, very important to the downstream water supply. And when you have too many animals and no predators, like, it messes those areas up. And it's funny because people blame the cattle ranchers, but the cattle ranchers, like the Grazing Association up there, at least like 7 years ago, they were going to the Game and Fish and being like, what is your deal? Like, we put 700 cattle up here for 3 months out of the year. You have 12,000 head of elk, or whatever the number was, like some obscene amount of elk up here year round. Like, you understand, they had to stop grazing during drought years because there was so much pressure from the elk that the grazers felt like they were overtaxing the landscape, and the Game and Fish was like, yeah, we're not going to give out any more tax. It's like, what? Little twist. Not to say that like all grazers are like that. There's a lot of overgrazing that happens in New Mexico. There's a lot of like really irresponsible extractive ranching operations that are do a lot of damage, but it's not the cow, it's the how. Wow, I've been talking to myself for an hour. Pretty good sunset. All right. Appreciate y'all. If you actually made it to the end of this video, like, you should probably get a life or something. I don't know. I'm gonna try to, there's somebody who wants to do some video editing, so I'm trying to get a bunch of this stuff on tape so we can go back through and cut out all the little funny bits and make some little TikTok videos or something. Although the people I'm really trying to appeal to, I don't think they watch that much TikTok, but I don't know, maybe the old ranchers down in the Estancia Valley are like super hip. Could be. The bean farmers. I'm gonna grow beans. Yep. Okay, I'm gonna shut up now. November 5th, vote independent.